Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to my podcast. It's good to talk. John D. Healy here. I started podcasting because I wrote this book for Stoney McCarn, my good friend. He was born in 1941 and he's kicking away all his life stories from 1941 up until recently. It's on Amazon. You can get it on audio too. Stoney, people do ask, is he still alive? Stoney is very much alive. I do have a guest today. I'm going to come to you, Dave, in 1 minute. Shout out to Liffey Van Lines, named after Liffey in Dublin. And the river and Liffey are running very smoothly. I will give a shout out to Irish Exclaimer USA, Paddy McCarthy, good for local news. My last podcast was with JP Cohn of Global Executive Tours. And there was a lot of interesting topics on that, like giving a tour of Ireland. I'll come back to that. My guest today, Dave Hannigan. David, good morning and welcome to It's Good to Talk. Tell me about you.
Hi, John. My name is Dave Hannigan. I come from Poker in Cork City. I've been in America for 25 years now. I live out in Long Island, out in the sticks in Long Island. I teach history at a community college out here, and I write a weekly column for the Irish Times.
Okay, that's good. And you're from Cork City, is it?
Yes, I'm from the south side of the city.
Cork County is the biggest county in Ireland, and Cork City is known as the second capital of Ireland, or as Cork people say, the first capital of Ireland.
The real capital, as we like to point out.
We'll go for that one. So you have written a book about Muhammad Ali, about when he was in Ireland in 1972. And it's a wonderful book. I've browsed through a lot of it, and I love the stories. And tell me what got you into picking that topic.
Well, John, I always found it kind of an incredibly incongruous thing, like that Muhammad Ali, the most glamorous, black athlete in the world, landed in this incredibly white country in 1972 and was adored and, caused havoc and was loved. And that part alone appealed to me, like just, the fish out of water element. And then
Right.
as I delved into it, the real hero of the book, and this is ironic considering I'm from Cork, is a Kerry man, Buddy Sugru, who some of your older listeners might remember. Buddy was a circus strongman with Duffy's Circus in the 50s, who used to do all sorts of feats of strength, like dragging people on a trailer around the big top with his teeth, and he once dragged a bus across O'Connell Bridge. And Buddy Sugru was this remarkable character from Killorglin who somehow was a publican in London in the 60s and somehow had the audacity and ambition to say, I'm going to bring Muhammad Ali to fight in Dublin. Obviously, the very idea of it was so preposterous that he was laughed out of the room, and somehow, some way, this incredible character, Buddy Sugru, pulled off this promotion.
Well, it was wonderful and good for you to research it, because a lot of people forget some of the history. The bits I know about Muhammad Ali is that his parents, especially Abe Grady, came from Ennis in County Clare. And Abe came here in the 1800s and he married a slave, or I guess she was a free slave then, from Liberia. Abe must have been a very good-looking man. As a matter of fact, I've never met a bad-looking Grady in all my life, and I will have another Grady on to sing a song for us later on here today. So Abe married this woman, and they went on to have children, and they were obviously in love. And as you said, Muhammad Ali was a handsome, good-looking man himself, very humble and down-to-earth type of individual as well. So tell us a little bit about the research that you had to do for this book.
Well, I first wrote a version of this book I researched it in 2001, when I was very lucky in that a lot of the people that were involved were still alive. A lot of the people who came here with Ali, like Pete Hamill, the Irish-American journalist who many of your listeners would know. He was a legendary New York tabloid columnist, right? Bud Schulberg, who wrote On the Waterfront and and several other movies. Bud Schulberg, the screenwriter, was also with him that week. Jose Torres, the former light heavyweight champion of the world. So I interviewed a lot of these people about like what Dublin was like in 72. And in fact, another guy should mention Rock Brenner, who was the son of Yul Brenner, the famous Hollywood actor. And Rock Brenner was Ali's bodyguard at the time.
Okay.
He was a very strange bodyguard. He was a hippie who always had a guitar and a caftan. And he basically came to Dublin with him because Rock Brenner had been to Trinity College in Dublin as an undergraduate. So he knew the lie of the land in Dublin. So there was all these extraordinary people who were in Dublin that week, right, and most of whom were still alive back then.
Ironically that you say that, one of my colleagues here at work at Liffey Van Lines Moving Company is Paul McAvey. Paul comes from a family of boxers as well, his grandfather, great-grandfather. And Paul had the luck, I guess, and the passion to meet up with a guy called Jimmy Glynn. There's a famous bar in Manhattan, maybe you've been in it, Jimmy's Corner. It's called Jimmy's Corner because of the boxing in the corner. Yeah. And Jimmy Glynn was a good, very, very good friend of Muhammad Ali, and they shared a lot of memories together. And I'm sure Jimmy Glynn was in Dublin for that fight too. Jimmy Glynn only died 2020 from the COVID virus. He was 89 years old. The bar is still going strong, and Paul McVeigh is going to frequent the bar to bring this podcast and a copy of your book into Jimmy Glynn's son, Adam Glynn. So Jimmy's Corner is still going well. So you were a writer yourself. You still write for the Irish Times, do you?
I do, yeah, every week, yeah.
Okay, well, very good. Like my predecessor, John Healy, wrote for the Times too, from Mayo. He wrote a book called No One Shouted Stop. So of all the characters you came across, what about local Dublin people? I'm a big fan of local Dublin people.
Well, the funny thing is, he made an incredible impact in terms of like when he met ordinary people. So Fintan O'Toole, another Irish Times journalist, Fintan O'Toole, his father Sammy was a bus driver or bus conductor actually, and he was on a bus out in the Wicklow Mountains. Think about this now. In July 1972, he came upon a group of mostly African American men jogging through the Wicklow Hills, and he stopped the bus because immediately Sammy O'Toole knew this was the great Muhammad Ali, and he stopped. And the amazing thing about Muhammad Ali is he stopped because he thrived on the oxygen of meeting people and seeing what an impact his face would have on somebody in a situation where they weren't expecting him. And Sammy O'Toole invited him onto the bus and offered him to drive him back to the hotel and everything, but he declined. But yeah, there was another woman I couldn't find who Ali talked about going in for he had tea and cake with a woman another day who he happened to be running past her house, and he was invited in. There was a street sweeper outside Crow Park early one morning that he ended up having a chat with. So the great thing about Muhammad Ali, in contrast to the modern great athletes like your Tiger Woods or your LeBron James or Lionel Messi or any of these people, is he loved meeting people and he thrived on that kind of interaction with ordinary folk.
Well done to Sammy O'Toole, Fintan O'Toole's father, for being to stop the bus and bring the entourage back. I can see now where Fintan O'Toole got his intuition and creativity as well, more than yourself. So other characters that come into play in the book, ordinary people you mentioned there. The big fight then, on that night, he was fighting a guy called, Al Blue Lewis. We don't know much about him, I guess, because Muhammad Ali is the star of your book.
Well, I actually went to Detroit. Al Blue Lewis is dead now, but I went to Detroit and I met Al Blue Lewis in the back room of his doctor's office in 8 Mile in Detroit. And a lovely man, a lovely, gentle kind of, like a gentle giant of a man who early in his life was sent to prison for manslaughter because he was in his teens, he was a street thug, and he had killed a man, and he got out of jail early for saving a prison warden's life during a prison riot. And then he became a boxer, and Al Blue Lewis went to Dublin, and he remembered it as the greatest week of his life because he was treated so wonderfully. He knew nothing about Dublin. In fact, he had never seen cows before until he went to Dublin, and he was treated, as he said, he was treated like a star as much as Ali was for that week.
It's a pity we didn't come down to County Mayo, where I'm from. Lots of cows and sheep down there. Additions to the book. You can hold the book up for me for a moment, please. I just want to see the cover again. The cover is fantastic, and as we said earlier about that I never saw an ugly Grady man or a woman. He surely was a fine-looking man and a humble guy, to say the least. So with that, I'm going to call on Jimmy Grady, who's related to Muhammad Ali indirectly down the centuries. And Jimmy's going to sing a song for you, Dave Hannigan, and for myself and for my listeners. So Jimmy, come in and sing We're All Related.
Oh, my granny had a talent for the genealogy. For before there were computers, she could trace your family tree. You'd call in for a visit, and before you drink your tea, to everyone you know you'd be related. We are all related through marriage or through birth, which either is a blessing or a God Almighty curse. And you can trace the lineage for what it might be worth, but in Ireland, sure, we are all related. My name it is O'Reilly, I don't know. For my father he was Riley, but his father had a no. For one of them refused the soup, so they were forced to go. So to all the travelling Rileys I'm related. We are all related through marriage or through birth, which either is a blessing or a God Almighty curse. And you can trace the lineage for what it might be worth, but in Ireland sure we are all related. Hush your cousins on the radio, my granddad he would say. For we hope that you'll become a singing star like her someday. Now second, third, or twice removed doesn't matter anyway. To the famous Eleanor Shanley I'm related. We are all related through marriage or through birth, which either is a blessing or a God Almighty curse. And you can trace the lineage for what it might be worth, but in Ireland sure we are all related. Now your husband's second cousin is my second cousin too. But before ancestral thoughts arise, 'tis legal through and through. Now my brother's married to his sister's husband's sister, who, sure like I'm trying to say, we're all related. We are all related through marriage or through birth, which either is a blessing or a God Almighty curse. And you can trace the lineage for what it might be worth, but in Ireland sure we are all related. And if you don't believe me, then try it out someday. Just pick a random stranger, a local or a stray. You'll find that you're related in some peculiar way. And don't forget me in your will, 'cause we're related. We are all related through marriage or through birth, which either is a blessing or a God Almighty curse. And you can trace the lineage for what it might be worth, but in Ireland sure we are all related.
Back to you, Dave, again. I remember coming across something in the archives where Muhammad Ali actually wrote poetry, and he had some beautiful poems. It was on an RT documentary as well. And Brian Layden, who's my historian guy, guest on here regular, and we went through a whole podcast of all the Irish poets. And I feel bad now that myself and Brian Layden didn't include the Muhammad Ali one, because Muhammad Ali was very fond of the Irish connection and the freedom fighting background that the Troubles created in 1960s, of course, and that is indeed well documented in this book as well. Sonny McGurn couldn't figure out why he could sleep in a motel and his black helper had to sleep in the truck. So where can someone buy this book, Dave?
You can buy it on Amazon, or Kenny's Bookshop in Ireland does service where they sell, or they send books quite cheaply to America. Okay. It's also on Barnes & Noble website. Not in Barnes & Noble shops, but it's on the Barnes & Noble website for American viewers. And also, I just wanted to mention another great character in the book is Bernadette Devlin. Bernadette Devlin, who Muhammad Ali invites she's at the fight, but the day of the fight, her and her husband are invited for lunch with Muhammad Ali because he was fascinated by her because she was a huge star in America in 1972. You know, she was a big, famous for her human rights work, and she had just done a lecture tour of America a year earlier, and Ali was fascinated by her and her bravery and what she had already done in her life, and they sat down to break bread that day.
Very good. It's ironic you mentioned that, because I had another author like yourself on here, Martin Dillon. He wrote a book called The Sorrow and the Loss, and we went into depth conversation about Bernadette Devlin, and that's a podcast. If anyone didn't get it, scroll back and get it, or look up my pod page. And if you're listening to this podcast now, my guest is Dave Hannigan, and we're talking about Muhammad Ali being in Ireland in 1972, the big fight. So do subscribe so you don't miss any other one. I will have another boxing champ on in another podcast coming up soon. I'm going to keep that one quiet for a moment. So do keep searching for it. What other characters are in the book, Dave?
There's a Mayo connection actually that just came to me. Al Blue Lewis, when he arrives in Dublin, he goes jogging along the quays in Dublin, just, preparing for the fight. And there's an unmarked police car, and the guard in the car is Mayo football legend, I think, Willie McGee. 4 goals, Willie McGee.
Yes.
4 goals, Willie McGee, who was a big sports fan and a big boxing fan. So 4 goals, Willie McGee jumps out of the car, and Al Blue Lewis, because of his troubled past, the minute he sees a guard or a police officer in uniform, he immediately puts his hands in the air because he thinks he's going to be arrested for something. And it's actually just Willie McGee is a huge boxing fan, recognised that it was obviously Al Blue Lewis, and jumps out to kind of just say hello to him, and they end up having a lovely chat. So there's lots of crazy moments like that where like the two cultures collide, if you want to put it like that.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting that McGee from Mayo, the footballer, famous footballer indeed, because I covered a lot of Mayo stuff as well. Jerry Coyle on here, Councillor Jerry Coyle from Belmullet. He comes from a boxing family himself. Actually, his son is Henry Coyle, has a world medal for boxing. He's in Chicago. He'd be in about your age, young man, and I must get him on here sometime too. So shout out to the Coyles from they set up their own boxing club in Gisala. And so it's ironic that a small little village like Gisala has a boxing club. Or as Jerry Coyle said, his grandfather or his father used to say, Gisala is beautiful for the scenery, but you just can't eat the scenery. You have to live on something. Very, very sufficient type of people, the Coyles, indeed, from Gisala. Indeed, all the people of Erris and Belmullet, shout out there to them all. So who else did we... I'm sure there's more characters in the book, Dave.
There is Jack Lynch. The Taoiseach Jack Lynch became the first Western head of state to invite Ali to formally visit him in his office, right? And Jack Lynch obviously was a great sportsman, and he's winning hurling and football All-Irelands with Cork. So Jack Lynch sat down with him, and they had an interesting chat. And then what I think sums up Ali is he then basically went around Dáil Éireann, went around Leinster House causing havoc for a couple of hours, and ends up in the Dáil canteen having his dinner, where he had 2 steaks and some vegetables and Coca-Cola. And at one point, one of the workers in the Dáil canteen was worried because he was staying late to see Ali, and he phoned his wife, and then they put Ali on the phone to the wife saying, your husband won't be home because he's working. He wants to see me in the Dáil canteen. So there's lots of moments like that where he just, can you imagine? You can't imagine Tiger Woods or LeBron or Lionel Messi today, messing around like that and just having fun with it, like just enjoying their celebrity and their fame and the way that they can kind of, wreak havoc wherever they go.
Well, I have great respect too for Jack Lynch from Cork, indeed, the city on the Lee, because he brought Ireland into the EU when we were like a third world country and we needed, and it made Ireland what it is today. We're part of a much bigger market and very important situation to be in the world where it is at the moment. So Jack Lynch was a great statesman and the leader of Fianna Fáil for many, many years, and a great love for his city of Cork, and he was known to sing a song. So let me see, what else have we to talk about, Dave, today?
There was the other thing. There's great, people might enjoy this if they went. Cathal O'Shannon, the RT journalist, did a wonderful interview with Ali that's still on YouTube. It's available on YouTube, and it was recorded the night before the fight. And Cathal O'Shannon, I've watched hundreds of Ali interviews over the years, and this Cathal O'Shannon interview with him is probably one of the best interviews.
It is. I think that's the one I came across. That's where Ali recites a poem that he wrote.
About Attica, the prison riot. Yeah, he recites a poem about Attica, the prison riot. And the amazing thing is, he did the interview with RTE for £100. But Angelo Dundee, his trainer, said they'd need the £100 in cash. And it was 6 o'clock in the evening in Dublin in 1972, and the banks are long shut. So the RTE personnel had to go to the canteen in RTE and rustle through the tills and get £100 in used notes to pay. And it was a very strange thing, like that he wanted £100, which, by the way, he charged. I think he did an interview with ITV a year earlier, and it was like something like £12,000 or £14,000. He charged Michael Parkinson, but he did this for RTE for £100, and that's on YouTube, and it's fantastic. It's a really great moment.
Yeah.
The poem is lovely, and
I'd
he
love-
really is, Carl O'Shannon did a heck of a job.
I'd love Jimmy Grady to get that and to maybe to recite it sometime here on a podcast too, because Jimmy is doing very, very well. He's starting to play guitar now as well, and he covers a lot of songs, covers a lot of, the big one is Caledonia, and Jimmy is available with myself. If anybody needs us for a eulogy, I'll talk and Jimmy will sing. We performed a few of these in the past too. So let me see, what else did we not cover in the book?
Well, there's another musical element involving the Dubliners. The Dubliners climb into the ring. As somebody said, it's wonderful to see Luke Kelly and Muhammad Ali in the same shot, So the Dubliners climb into the ring and to play the anthem. And it's actually a very significant moment because the tickets for the fight didn't sell well because they were very expensive. So they were never going to fill Croke Park with the prices they were charging. And then Ali, there was another theory that Ali was too available that week. Like, he was everywhere. If you wanted to see Ali, he might pop up on O'Connell Street. So people didn't pay the money. But when the Dubliners sang the anthem, there was a guy called Don Elbaum who was in Al Blue Lewis's corner. Don Elbaum was from Cleveland, Ohio. And Don Elbaum said to me, he says, when those guys, and he didn't know the Dubliners, he says, when those guys played the anthem, it was like a signal went out, because suddenly I looked to one end of the stadium, which was Hill 16. He said, and it was like a scene in the Westerns where the Indians would come over the hill, and it was Dubliners climbing over the wall at Hill 16, streaming in for free. So it was a couple of thousand Dubliners came in for free, and the anthem was the moment that they basically made their entry. And again, if you watch the video, there's two guards walk towards Hill 16 as if they're going to stop this tide of Dubliners washing in. And they walk, and then they turn. They look like we might stop this, and then they go, no, we won't. And they turn around and they walk away. And they think better of it at that point, which was probably a wise move.
Well, JP Cohn was on my podcast, and he's bringing the Steelers to Croke Park in September, and we were discussing how many does the Croke Park Stadium hold, and I think it holds about 90,000. JP thinks 80,000, but I would never argue with JP. Executive Global Tours, and in a few minutes Brett Keisel is going to. Brett Keisel, he's a famous Steeler player as well. His nickname is Beard because he has a beard. He loves fishing in Ireland, so he's going to catch up on the fishing. So in a few minutes I'll get him to give a shout out for the tour that's coming up with the dates, so people that can contact JP about if they want to join the Steelers in Dublin, because it'll be a fun week. Just like your recollection of the Alley Week in Dublin. People hang out and they enjoy meeting strangers and talking. We're not shy in Mayo, and we're not shy in Dublin, we're not shy in Cork either. So let's see, what didn't we cover, David?
Well, I think, the interesting thing is sometimes when people think about this fight, they think that Ali must have been in Dublin when he was washed up. It was towards the end of his career. And it wasn't. Ali was actually in the prime of his career. He had just come back from his time where he was banned because of his opposition to the Vietnam War. He'd lost the Fraser. So in the summer of 72, he was waiting for a Fraser rematch. Fraser didn't want to give him. But the second half of his career had not yet happened. The second half of his career hadn't happened. So he was very much, the Rumble in the Jungle was yet to happen, the Trill in Manila, all that kind of stuff. So it was not a kind of washed up Ali at the end of his career. It was Ali, as the picture on the front of my book shows, it was Ali, still in the prime of his life.
So I will call on Brett Keisel to give a shout out for the tour, the Executive Global Tours with JP Cohn.
Woo! Hey Steeler Nation, the Beard here, Brett Kiesel. Join me for the inaugural first ever regular season game in Dublin, Ireland from September 26th to the 30th. This ultimate Yinzer experience includes a Guinness tour, sightseeing, whiskey tasting, and an opportunity to catch the big one with me on the Emerald Isle. And of course, can't forget the tailgate before the big game on the 28th. Contact Executive Global Tours at 914-979-2247 or info@executiveglobaltours.com. To book your spot, make sure to use my code BrettKiesel99. Here we go, Steelers. Here we go. Boom, 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 boom.
So I'm going to sign out a Gaeilge. Slán go agus spéis scéal agus sin scéal bhí sin scéal ar fad. Next podcast, which is also about boxing. Bye.